Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping right into one of the most absolutely fascinating frontiers in all of human physiology, your very own brain. We're going to dive into the cutting-edge science of how everyday actions are physically sculpting the architecture of your mind.
It's a question we've all asked ourselves at some point, right? Why do some of us just learn things so much more easily than others? Why does your coworker pick up a brand new software program in a single afternoon while you might find yourself kind of struggling with the basics for weeks? Well, Dr. Laura Boyd, a renowned brain researcher at the University of British Columbia, has dedicated her entire career to answering these exact questions. And the answers she's uncovered are honestly a real game changer.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. First, busting brain myths. Then, the 3 ways the brain changes. Third, the power of struggle. Fourth, personalized learning. And finally, build your brain.
Section 1. Busting brain myths. We're looking at outdated beliefs versus new science. So, for the longest time, the old belief was that after childhood, basically right after you hit puberty, your brain was essentially locked in. Done. We thought the only changes that happen in adulthood were strictly negative, like losing brain cells as we age or suffering from damage. But thanks to rapid advancements in MRI technology, we know that's just not true. The new science reveals this brilliant reality. Your behaviors continuously change your brain at literally any age. It is definitely not a static organ.
And this brings us to the absolute core concept of Dr. Boyd's research, neuroplasticity. This is your brain's incredible ability to reorganize itself by forming new connections every single time you learn a new fact or skill. It's the vital underlying mechanism not just for picking up, say, a new hobby, but also for absolutely critical medical processes like recovering from a stroke. Your brain is never just sitting there idle. Even when you're at rest and thinking about absolutely nothing, it is highly active. Moving on to Section 2, 3 ways the brain changes, the actual mechanics of learning. If we zoom way in on the microscopic mechanics of learning to see what neuroplasticity actually looks like in action, Dr. Boyd uses a really helpful rule of 3. Neuroplasticity doesn't just happen randomly. Your brain physically supports learning in 3 highly structured ways: through chemical changes, structural changes, and functional changes. Now, these can happen independently, but most of the time they're working together in concert.
Okay, so the crucial point here is understanding the difference between short-term and long-term memory. Picture this. You're trying to learn how to juggle. At first, your brain rapidly increases the chemical signaling between neurons. This chemical change is super fast, and it supports short-term memory. You might end an intense practice session feeling like you've completely mastered juggling, but then you wake up the next day, try it again, and you've totally lost the skill. Why? Because those fast, short-term chemical changes haven't yet induced the physical, structural changes you need for long-term memory. Real structural changes simply take time.
To put that into perspective, let's look at how literal these structural changes are. Take people who read Braille. They actually have physically larger hand sensory areas in their brains compared to those of us who don't. Or think about London taxi drivers. They have to memorize this incredibly complex map of London streets just to get their license. And because of that, they literally have larger brain regions devoted to spatial and mapping memories. It's wild. Your daily behaviors literally dictate the physical real estate of your mind. And that builds directly into our third mechanism, functional changes. It's kind of like a chain reaction. Step 1, as you use a specific brain region repeatedly, it becomes more excitable. Step 2, because it's more excitable, it becomes easier to use again. And finally, step 3, as these areas increase their excitability, your brain dynamically shifts how and when whole networks are activated. The more you practice, the more your entire brain literally rewires its integrated networks to support that specific skill. Section 3, the power of struggle. Why difficulty is actually a good thing. Now, this is where the science gets wonderfully counterintuitive. If our brains are so wonderfully plastic, why can't we just learn anything with ease? We often feel like if we're struggling to learn something, if we're just incredibly frustrated, we must be failing. But the research shows the exact opposite. Increased struggle during practice actually leads to both more learning and greater structural change in the brain. That feeling of deep frustration, that is the literal physical sensation of your brain trying to forge new, lasting structural pathways. To learn, you simply have to do the hard work. But, hey, there is a catch. Neuroplasticity is a two-way street. We naturally tend to think of positive plasticity, learning new skills, refining our movements, but there's also negative plasticity. This encompasses forgetting things you once knew, falling into drug addiction, or even developing chronic pain. Your brain is immensely plastic, which means it is shaped just as much by the negative habits you form and by the things you don't do as it is by your positive efforts. Section 4. The need for personalized learning. We're looking at lessons from stroke recovery here.
To really grasp the stakes of this, we have to look at Dr. Boyd's research on stroke recovery. Strokes are now the #1 cause of long-term disability in adults globally. While we've gotten a lot better at keeping people alive after severe strokes, which is fantastic, we've largely failed to develop truly effective rehabilitation interventions. It's a massive societal problem, and solving it is going to require a fundamental shift in how we understand neuroplasticity.
Through her work observing stroke variability, Dr. Boyd realized something profound that applies to every single one of us. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to learning. You've probably heard that hugely popular myth that it takes exactly 10,000 hours of practice to master a new skill, right? Well, actually, scratch that. It's just not that simple. Patterns of neuroplasticity are highly variable from person to person. For some of us, mastery might take way more than 10,000 hours, and for others, it'll take far less. Because of this immense variability, researchers are leaning heavily into biomarkers. These are specific characteristics of your brain's structure and function that can be used to match you with precise therapies. Think about how modern cancer treatments use a patient's genetics to match them with a very specific chemotherapy. In stroke recovery, analyzing a combination of these unique brain biomarkers is the key to creating personalized medicine. And for those of us just navigating everyday life, this points directly to why personalized learning is absolutely crucial. Finally, Section 5, build the brain you want. Let's talk about taking control of your neuroplasticity. So now that we know how neuroplasticity works behind the scenes, how do we actually take control of it? Well, here is your game plan. First, study how you learn best. Because your brain is completely unique to you, your optimal strategies will be unique too, and they might even change depending on the specific skill you're tackling. Second, consciously repeat behaviors that are healthy for your brain. Third, actively break those negative habits that drive negative plasticity. And finally, put in the practice. The absolute best driver of neuroplastic change is your own behavior. There's no magic pill here. Nothing happens without you doing the work. I want to leave you with this pretty wild thought. From the moment you started listening to this explainer to right now, your brain has literally, physically changed. Every encounter, every struggle, and every new piece of information alters the physical structure of your mind. So knowing that you hold this incredible power to shape your own neural pathways, what kind of brain are you actively constructing today? The choice is entirely yours.